Hi, hi everyone. Please continue eating. How's the food? Good. I want to thank Fresh Gourmet, Carlos. You're back there. Thank you. This time I'd like to do some recognitions. Please feel free to continue eating. First up, I'd like to recognize all the San Marino City Club past presidents. So if you're a past president, would you please stand? We have quite a few here. We have Don Morris, Wally Boswell, Ivan Hunt, Dick Pearson, Lord Kleinluck, Jordan Angels, Hal Bowl. Am I missing anyone? Oh, Janice Figment, sorry. Janice Lee Wingman. All right, anyone else? I didn't miss. Oh, Jody Cho. You're not Sandy. What? Did I? Jim Justice? Your check bounced, Jim. No, just kidding. Okay. Uh, okay. The board, this year's board. Can we have this year's board stand? Okay, we have first VP Ed Tom, second VP Andrew Rory. We have membership Nora Ovos, treasurer Bo Carlos, um, communications Bruno, communications Pete the immediate past president, Hector also membership, and Kathy Johnson. Where are you? Oh, Kathy Johnson. Arrangements and Julie Fong also arrangements. I think I got every. Susan, sorry, Susan Jakubowski, our secretary. All right. City council members, we have the mayor here, Mayor Gretchen Shepherd-Avi, council member John Chow, and myself. All right, city officials here tonight. Can we please stand? Who do we have? We have our city manager, Philippe Espinor, police chief at Control, fire chief, Burrell, community, development hit, Taki Johnson, Nicole, Tibbet, assistant city manager. Am I missing anybody? No, okay. All right, Board of Education. Who's here from the Board of Education? We have President Joseph Chang. We have Joshua Sun. Anyone else? Oh, Peter, let you go there. Oh, what else? Okay. Uh, okay. School district. Who's here from the school district? Hey, not for Stephen Soy. Then you. I think. Thanks for coming. All right. Let's see. We did that one. School board. School. Okay. Our fellow San Marino clubs. Chinese club is anyone here? Hi, welcome. And that's now in Chen is Bennett here for here? No. Okay. Hey, so big day. He's here. Whoop. Jerry, do Jerry Shang. Welcome, welcome. Okay, anyone from Rotary? Rotary, please stand. Nicole Basseri, this here. With the wall. Teddy Basseri, Wall Roswell. All right, welcome. Okay, March birthdays. Anyone have a March birthday? Happy, that's, wow, look at that. There's, please stand up. Wow, Jen Kashua, Jim, Sophia. All right, happy birthday. Oh, you gonna sing? No, okay, Elsa says no. All right. Okay, yeah, this time we'd like to welcome our San Marino High School student athletes. Hey! And to do that, our second VP, Andrew Hardy.
Well, hello, board members, and it's my privilege and honor to introduce our Samuel student athletes and pass these last months of MVPs. So we're going to call them up. We're going to start with the badminton coach. He's going to introduce the badminton program to the city, and hopefully we can go out there and support them as well. And then we'll follow up with the MVP. So Coach Mozzie and the badminton players can come up, as well as the fellow MVPs as well. We're going to save the best for the last. So Monica Lee, Jaden Kasuma, you're welcome to come up and we'll be introducing you. So first I'm gonna start with Coach Mazi here to give us a little bit of an introduction with the badminton program. Coach.
All right, thank you. Well, my name is Mozi Manny. I want to thank you for inviting us. Well, thank you very much for having us. Well, badminton has been in San Marino for quite a few years, but it's a kind of a game which is, well, people want to call it not popular, but it is very popular sport. It's just we haven't had a chance to introduce it the way it's supposed to be introduced at the school level. Um, well, I'm the new coach of San Marino High School, and the most luxury, I see a lot of the faces, and I know for you, I know you guys for a long time, and a lot of you know me from football or know me from the Rotary, but for some reason now I'm the badminton coach. So yeah,
Can we introduce the players and let us know what positions they play in?
well, this is not like football. Everybody play one position,
Okay.
defense and offense. Uh, this is Archer Lin, and this is Wei Wong, and these are the two of our varsity players which we choose to bring here today. You know, before I became the coach, 3 years ago, I volunteered at the school to help with the badminton team, and just I was absorbing and helping out, and I happened to see these two kids. They come up, uh, they were brand new. They came to the sport. They were playing. Artem was his first time playing, and Raid was maybe was playing a little bit before that. I noticed two kids for two reasons. One, I remember Artem was one of those kids you always see. He comes into the practice. One of the first kids he shows up to practice. One of the last kid he leaves the practice. And you never have to tell this kid to clean up. You never have to tell this kid to set up the things, and he's always there. He's always helping, and also, Wade is what I know this from Wade. He had some talent, which is. It was a tryout. There were like 80 kids, and I picked these kids through all these 80 kids, and I thought he's gonna do great. He's one of our top players today, and he can go really far, and these two kids they're only on 11th grade. They still have to be lucky to have them another year, so but they can do fantastic. They wrote some stuff like what they have done beside badminton. Do I have time to read those? Not
Hopefully we'll have them back when they're MVPs.
okay. Very well, very well. I want to, before I leave, I want to thank you guys for many, many years of supporting San Marino High School with donations and also the MVP plaques. I really appreciate it. And also, I know you guys do the same for badminton. Badminton at this time, actually, if is there any way we can get extra donation for badminton season? Since we're
that.
all right, all right. Also, before I leave, I just want to mention there are we trying to expand the badminton in San Marino. As you noticed, our flyers on your tables. You can just use the QR code with your phone, or you can just take a picture of it, take it to kids, grandkids, or friends in neighborhood in San Marino or outside of San Marino. We have a summer program which is starting June 9th to July 10th. This is the first time ever we started something like that in San Marino, and with your support, it's going to do fantastic. We come back here, we CIF probably win a championship or something like that.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Arden and Wei, for joining us this evening. And as a community, let's go out there and support them and get them to the CIF. Thank you. So let's start with ladies first. We're going to start with girls water polo MVP, Donica Lee. Donica, would you introduce yourself to our membership and the position you like? And she also brought her plaque. So for those of you who haven't seen our MVP plaque that we give to our players or student athletes, please take a moment and say hi. Donica?
Hi, I'm Danica Lee. I'm the captain of the water polo team and also MVP. Her on the picture. Do not look. Do not look. Nope.
There it is.
Um, there's not really a position you play in water polo. You kind of play everything. So I kind of play wing. Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Zaina, and congratulations on winning the MVP this year. Yes, you can. And she can sit down. Our next MVP player is our boys soccer MVP, and that is Jason Kasuma. Jason, would you introduce Jaden? Jaden, sorry, that's me, my nervous voice here. But Jaden, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jane Kasuma. I was captain of the soccer team. I played center back. And thank you all for having me here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn it back over to our president, Hunter.
Thank you, Ed. Before we introduce our featured speaker, I'd like to recognize a few more people here tonight. Our former mayor, Dr. Stephen Huang. And we have also Eugene Sun, former Mayor Dennis Neer, former Mayor Season Young Bao, and also from the Huntington Library, Randy Shulman, Vice President. Where are you, Randy? Welcome. And also past President of Chinese Club, Alan Chen. Welcome. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the featured speaker. And here to do that will be First VP Ed Tom.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Are you guys ready for a treat? Okay, so in the past, we heard some comments from our members that some of the speakers were a little boring. So tonight, you guys gonna be in for a treat. So I hope you guys are awake. So it was about a year ago that I saw this powerful video on YouTube titled Buried History, the Massacre of 1871. Well, our speaker here tonight, she was featured on that video, and I was so moved by it that I decided that I believe that you guys will enjoy about what you're about to hear. Dr. Julie Fong is a historian, and she also teaches Asian Study in Cal State Los Angeles. So, without further ado, I will let Dr. Fong tell you a little bit about Chinese American, past and present, contribute to California. So let's give a City Club warm welcome to Dr. Fong.
So first, I have to tell you how unusual it is to see a really large picture of yourself above the screen. And I'm also great, thank you. It is very, very strange to see that, but yay. First, I would really like to thank the San Marino City Club for this evening, for inviting me to speak. It is an honor to be speaking to you all about Chinese American history, talking about Chinese Americans past and present. The Chinese came to the Americas, well before the birth actually of the United States. In the early part of the 1700s, they came here as sailors on various trading ships. The first significant wave of migration occurred in the 1840s when primarily Chinese men came to Gold Mountain in search for riches. They were also recruited in rather large numbers by labor contractors looking to replace slave labor right after the Civil War. This was before the creation of California as a state and during the time of the gold rush. This was a time that brought many different people to Northern California. There was a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multinational confluence of characters. There was the outlaw Joaquin Murrieta, known as the Mexican Robin Hood. whose dubious origins and history was so shrouded in mystery. I don't know what happened. It's a mystery. Um, so it was so shrouded in mystery that his exploits were at once thrilling and frightening. We had Mexicana tortilla slingers, we had Miwok traders, we had courtesans of every national origin, and of course there were the Chilean, French, Chinese, African American, and Anglo gold miners. But the foreign miners' tax forced Chinese and other non Anglo miners to look for work outside of the mines. This was legislation that imposed a $20 fee every month for the right to mine in the state. In reality, this was only levied on the Chinese and Latino miners, while foreign born Anglo miners did not pay this tax. Subsequently, Chinese Americans ventured into timber camps, into the agricultural industry, into railroad construction, and far flung and less well known places like the grape fields of Sonoma County, and into what would one day be Yosemite with the earliest version of the National Park Services. So, tonight's dinner actually brings to mind another menu and another evening. I'd like for you all to, well, actually, let's close our eyes for a bit, shall we? And I want you to imagine that instead of the wilds of San Marino, right, you are in the heart of the Sierra Nevadas. You're scouting all day, walking through the woods, chopping through the shrubs, with an expedition of close to 24 men. But punctuating your day, you're served a menu like this one on white linen. As a main dish, you are served some stuffed lamb, a beef meat pie, some steak. And for dessert, you have your choice of sago pudding and apple pie. A simple, light fare, right? In the middle of the wilds, amongst a mountain range extending half the length of the state of California. Such was the task of Tai Sing, this fine gentleman right here. Robert Sterling Yard, founder of the National Park Services, stated, "To me, Tai Sing had assumed apocryphal proportions. The extraordinary recitations of his astonishing culinary exploits had been more than I could quite believe. But I believe them all now, and more. I shall not forget that dinner, soup, trout, chops, fried potatoes, string beans, fresh bread, hot apple pie, cheese, and coffee. It was the first of many equally elaborate and equally appreciated." Needless to say, Robert Sterling Yard and Stephen Mather, his colleague, found Chinese Americans like Tai Sing indispensable as cooks, as wilderness experts, and expedition guides. Tai Sing helped to create the paths and the path that would one day designate places like Yosemite as part of the largest national park system in the world. Today, you can still hike to the 10,500-foot peak called Sing Peak, so named after him. In the latter half of the 1800s and early 1900s, it was actually unlikely for many white Americans to have seen or met a Chinese or Chinese American. Perhaps they might have even heard of the story of Ah Fong Moy, featured here. She is the first known Chinese woman to immigrate into the United States. The Chinese lady, dubbed by traders Nathaniel and Frederick Carn, was an exhibit by these two American merchants. It's actually uncertain how these two merchants were able to get Ah Fong Moy out of China and into New York, but what is certain is that Ah Fong Moy, as an exhibit, was a marketing strategy to sell Chinese goods in New York. Within the exhibit, Chinese furnishings and decor would help familiarize Americans to develop a fascination and a desire for Chinese goods. She did not speak English and could only communicate with her interpreter, a Chinese man who traveled with the exhibit. It is uncertain what became of her after the decline of the merchant's business. Some say that she was sold to a circus. Other accounts have her traveling to Europe to continue the exhibit. But the disappearance of Ah Feng Moi and her mysteriousness was similar to Chinese American invisibility in early American history. Many did not see the Chinese Americans who washed linens, grew food, and prepared meals throughout the United States. Strangely, despite these indispensable services, which was often unwanted labor and jobs by others, Chinese immigrants became economic scapegoats by politicians and labor leaders who blamed them for depressing wages and taking jobs away from white workers. In the mid to late 19th century, anti-Chinese rhetoric became widespread, fueled by racist stereotypes and propaganda about economic competition, claiming that Chinese took jobs at such low wages that they depressed labor. They were depicted as unassimilatable and foreign. The press, labor unions, and various political factions, and at various points, amplified these negative sentiments, culminating in actual violence against Chinese communities already here in the United States. One particularly brutal example occurred in 1871 in Los Angeles, when a mob of 500 men targeted the small Chinese community of less than 172 people, in a time when Los Angeles itself was only an outpost of about 5,000 people. Los Angeles was a place characterized at the time by its violence, its vigilantism, and lawlessness. And as the story goes, a mob gathered after hearing that a policeman and a rancherman had been killed as a result of a rivalry between two Chinese groups fighting over a Chinese woman. In other versions, it was a beloved saloon owner. And as news of their deaths spread across the city, rumors grew to epic proportions, claiming that the Chinese were killing whites wholesale. The massacre took place on Calle de los Negros, present-day Los Angeles Street. They killed at least 17 Chinese residents, 10% of the total Chinese community at the time, and the largest mass lynching in American history. Local authorities offered little protection. And after the massacre, the 10 prosecutions of over 500 men that were actually involved were overturned because of technicalities. Over time, hostility towards Chinese immigrants increased, and there were similar outbreaks of violence seen throughout the United States, from Wyoming to Oregon to various parts of California. Incidents of anti-Chinese violence also occurred in places like Mexico, Peru, and Australia in the same time period, using the same script of anti-Chinese messaging found in the United States. A few years later, the Page Act of 1875 prohibited specific forms of labor and women brought in for quote-unquote immoral purposes, but essentially enforced against the Chinese. This was an early effort to restrict Asian immigration without categorically restricting migration based on race. This would change with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which barred all Chinese from entering into the United States. It was a policy renewed every 10 years until 1902, when it was made permanent. It remains the only law in United States history that names one group of people for exclusion. It was not repealed until 1943, when China was a member of the Allied nations during World War II, but still only allowed a yearly limit of 105 Chinese immigrants. This would later change with the 1965 Immigration Act. The Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924 would solidify the United States' bans, not just against the Chinese, but across Asia, and place primacy on migrants from Northern and Western Europe. The legacy of these immigration policies shaped the United States that you see today. The Chinese Exclusion Act established a powerful template for future restrictive immigration measures. lawmakers realized that they could use federal legislation to control views and narratives of specific ethnic or national groups, with immigration as the specter for the nation's ills. Approach expanded to include the exclusion of other Asian groups and other racial groups, culminating in broader laws that set national quotas based on country of origin. For the Chinese living in the United States, the Exclusion Act and subsequent immigration acts created severe hardships. Fearing that a trip back to China could result in permanent exclusion from the United States, many men stayed in America indefinitely, separated from their wives and children and families. In addition, anti Chinese sentiment did not disappear once the Page Act, the Exclusion Act, the Johnson Reed Act was passed. Discrimination actually grew worse, especially in hiring and in the workforce. Barred from competing in higher paying jobs, also because they were banned from schools and higher education, they often turned to small scale entrepreneurship, opening laundries, restaurants, and other businesses that provided services to local communities. Yet, despite these challenges from the federal, state, and local level, Chinese Americans created a home for themselves in the United States. In this picture, you see the Chinese community celebrating possibly a Lunar New Year festival in the map of Los Angeles as it appeared in 1871. This beautiful image is courtesy of the Los Angeles Public Library. So then what happened with the Chinese that were here in the United States? Because of racial covenants, that is, the restriction of groups of people to certain neighborhoods, many Chinese lived in small urban enclaves that became known as Chinatowns. These were cultural and economic hubs featuring grocery stores, herbal medicine shops, restaurants, and communal associations that formed their community. They also functioned as protective spaces where residents could find mutual support and resources. They were, for outside communities, tourist destinations and places where you could find a decent and affordable meal. And it was also, as we know today, a destination where people traversed looking for health care. While Chinatowns offered relative safety for the Chinese community, they were also targets for stereotypes and sensationalized media coverage. Some visitors saw these neighborhoods as exotic and intriguing, while others viewed them through the lens of fear and racism. In many cases, local ordinances of informal real estate covenants restricted the ability of the Chinese to move beyond these neighborhoods, perpetuating de facto and de jure segregation. That is, segregation by name and by law. The exception being Chinese Americans who had Anglo friends who were sympathetic to their plights and helped them purchase homes in other neighborhoods. Even then, having powerful white friends did not prevent you from being persecuted. For example, Chinese doctor and herbalist Li Po Tai was subjected to multiple persecutions and censures to his practice. Even as a wealthy Chinese herbalist, and even though Senator Leland Stanford of Stanford University and then Governor Mark Hopkins were his loyal customers. Here you see images of Chinese Americans in Southern California. For those who are unaware, in downtown LA, this is actually the third rendition of Chinatown. The first Chinatown, 1.0 that I call it, is this yellow vintage picture that you see right here. Okay. This is courtesy of the Chinese American Historical Society of Southern California. It was torn down to create Union Station in 1933. The image of Chinatown 2.0, you see this right here, this example right here, in 1938 has a much more notorious past. The center right picture, right, this was the brainchild of architect and city booster Christine Sterling, the same woman who created the Mexican-themed Olvera Street. She took the movie sets from the Hollywood blockbuster adaptation of The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, walled it up, and called it China City. It was a tourist site that employed Chinese Americans, but did not house them. And during its decade-long existence, there were two mysterious fires. one that occurred a year after it was built in 1939, and then another in 1949. The remaining compound was eventually razed in 1955. The current Chinatown that we all know and love, I call this Chinatown 3.0. So this was created, and that's Chinatown 3.0 right here and right here too. So this was created in 1938 by Chinese American civic leaders and businessmen. And it is here that you see also the communities that grew up in this Chinatown. So on the top left is one of the projects, for example, that document the Chinese that grew up in Chinatown. On the top right is a snapshot image, this one right here. It's one of my favorite paintings by Tyrus Wong, a beloved community member and artist whose work is best known from the Disney movie Bambi. The bottom right is Los Angeles Meiwa Drum Corps, a group formed under the oldest and still functioning LA Women's Club for Chinese Americans in 1931. The Chinese Exclusion Act and its extensions remained until World War II, as said previously, when China was an ally of the United States. However, maintaining discriminatory laws was seen as hypothetical in the global struggle against fascism. In fact, the nation of Japan used the Chinese Exclusion Act as propaganda for China to break its relationships with the United States and its allies. The United States, in turn, realized that while Chinese Americans served in the war, it could no longer justify exclusion. In fact, full participation in a nation was not possible without full recognition. Only now, in the past few decades, have we been able to recognize and retrieve from archival history that Asian Americans have actually served not just in World War II, but in every major war in the United States of America. This includes the Revolutionary War. On the top right corner is the picture of an unidentified Chinese man. Can I just say, I love this clicker thing. This is wonderful. I don't have this when I lecture at the university. It's wonderful. So this is a picture of an unidentified Chinese man, sometimes thought to be Charles Peter, a Chinese American who served in the Continental Army. At the bottom left, you see this little picture right here of Corporal Joseph Pierce, a Chinese Union soldier who was born in Canton and served during the Battle of Antietam during the Civil War. Here you see this beautiful picture of Calvin Chin and Anthony Wong, the first Chinese Americans commissioned as second lieutenants, officers in World War II after graduating from the Medical Administration Corps Officer Candidate School at Camp Berkeley in Texas. Now, I want to temper this for a moment, because along with these changes that repealed Chinese exclusion in 1943, this came in tandem to the incarceration of over 120,000 Japanese Americans in concentration camps all over the United States. The irony was similar to that of the Chinese. While Japanese American soldiers were fighting in World War II, their families were kept here in the camps in the United States. Pictured here are Fernando Joseph Sosa and Francisco Frank Sosa Masuda, whose niece and my auntie sits here this evening and is testimony to the work that is done by her uncles, and generations of Asian Americans who continue to work to create a more just world. Now, it wasn't until the Immigration and Nationality Act, also known as the Hart-Celler Act, in 1965, that the United States significantly overhauled its immigration policies, doing away with national origin quotas that had discriminated against the Chinese, Japanese, other Asians, and other groups of people. The Immigration Act of 1965 was a direct result of the Civil Rights Movement, often attributed to Dr. Martin Luther King. It was also an Asian American, Latino, Mexican American, Anglo American, African American, Native American, Pacific Islanders. We were all there. We all participated in this multiracial, multi-site effort to eliminate discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. In this picture, you see Asian Americans protesting along with the Black Panthers. This poster is the effort of this other poster right here, down here. This really beautifully drawn poster right here was a poster that was drawn by the Third World Liberation Movement to prevent the closing of low-income housing. Because of the civil rights movement, immigration laws based on national origin or race came under serious scrutiny. Though the 1965 Act did not fully erase the history and continued pattern of limiting immigration based on race and nationality, it did change and reshape immigration as we see today. This act completely removed the quota system and instead opted for a system that relied on quote unquote preferences for certain types of immigrants who were highly skilled in fields that the Department of Labor deemed understaffed or had existing family relations within the United States. Above on the top left is a picture of the first Chinese American senator, Hiram Fong of Hawaii, who was a son of sugar plantation workers. His work on helping to assuage fears of Asian migration within the federal government, in tandem to grassroots civil rights organizers, helped the passage of this act. And while the Hart-Celler Act changed the American community, it was unable to completely eliminate the persistence of prejudice during a crisis. You see here the Stop AAPI Hate poster that was a campaign created during the COVID pandemic in 2020. I was going to say 1920. It feels like 100 years ago, though, that targeted Chinese Americans and Asian Americans during the COVID crisis. Understanding the history of Chinese Americans as part of American history offers several crucial lessons for us. First, that economic anxiety often drives xenophobic policies, regardless of its basis in facts. Second, that federal policy can either challenge or reinforce racial biases. The Chinese Exclusion Act validated prevailing racial stereotypes, laying a legal framework that shaped other discriminatory legislation, but despite having very little basis in reality. At the time, Chinese Americans made up less than 0.03% of any given community. And even today, in 2025, Chinese Americans are still only 1.6% of the total U.S. population. Finally, the story of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans highlights the resilience of marginalized communities. Despite systemic discrimination, Chinese Americans built thriving communities, persevered in passing cultural traditions, and contributed to American society. From the arts, you see the picture of the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, where in 2022, a story of a Chinese American family received the Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Original Screenplay. Chinese Americans have contributed to the agricultural development of California as the asparagus capital, from digging the ditches in Central Valley to the building of Sonoma wineries. In law and politics, you see our first Chinese American woman representative, Judy Chu, at the signing of the bill that protects our San Gabriel Mountains with then President Barack Obama. Not pictured here are my mentors like Honorable Yi-Jen Shuai of San Marino, who helped protect Monterey Park from English-only ordinances, or Linda Hua, who was the first Asian American president of the California Community College Board. So I wrote this before I knew that Linda was coming, so I'm just letting you know.
We didn't get to hear what Linda was so special. We already know her special.
She's special for all the reasons, but she's especially special because she's one of the kindest people ever. And that's a lot in this world. Chinese Americans in the military. Here you see the recognition. This is something I'm very proud of and was part of. This was the recognition of Chinese American veterans during World War II. In education and civil rights, here you see a picture of the Tate family right here. A prominent family in San Francisco that repealed the segregation of California schools and was one of the very first civil rights cases in education in 1885. Not pictured here is the case of the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, which laid the foundation for birthright citizenship in 1898 so that any person, born on U.S. soil is considered an American citizen. In infrastructure and civic development, in the development of railroads in the late 1800s, to the engineers that built our freeway systems and bridges, some of whom, like James, is sitting here today. In sciences, with people like Dr. Wu, who was one of the first Chinese American women scientists that was part of the space race and the research on atomic energy. And in technology, you see here, I don't know, this is kind of like a mixed one. Steve Chen right here, who created YouTube. And in the backdrop of these pictures, I don't know if any of you've noticed this. Can anybody guess what this is? Absolutely right. Okay? I knew you would get that right. That's an A for tonight. This is the picture of the Chinese gardens at the Huntington. One of my favorite places in the world. One of the largest civic engagement projects by the Chinese American community that raised millions to build this place of beauty. It is a fabulous example of what a community can do. And lastly, because I began this discussion of food, and really because I'm also a food historian, I feel inclined to end this presentation with a few of the many contributions that Chinese Americans made to food and agriculture. Starting in the middle is the Bing cherry, named for Ah Bing, a Chinese orchard worker in Oregon who introduced this hybrid in the 1800s. In the top right, it's kind of an image. You see a semi-image of it. This is a book by Alice Waters, one of the founders of California cuisine. One of my favorite places to eat, too, is Chez Panisse. However, much of her produce and meats, when she first started her restaurant, it actually came from Chinese and Japanese farmers and butchers. At the bottom right is an image of Chinese workers at Buena Vista, the oldest winery in Sonoma. Built in the 1800s. On the bottom left is ketchup. Yes, folks, ketchup. Its literal translation in Cantonese means tomato sauce. It was then translated into British and American cookbooks. And lastly, because my daughter is here tonight, and I know that I would be remiss if I didn't say boba, right? Probably, to her, probably one of the most singular and most important Chinese American contribution. These are just a few of the many contributions of Chinese Americans. Despite a history that was shaped by violence, discrimination, and exclusion, Chinese American history reveals that there is a possibility to repeal unjust policies, to build a more beautiful and equitable America that thrives on love, community, and a full belly.
What's it? 70 here.
Okay,
Sandy.
I was told that I left too soon. This is the question I may or may not have answer section.
Hey, folks.
I do I have a question in the back right here? Yes, question.
So after the Chinese came and were working on the rails,
Uh-huh.
the Exclusion Act prevented additional Chinese who were coming, but it also essentially caused a lot of Chinese to go home or force them to go home.
Well, that's the thing about excluding people. They still find a way to come in. So there were many methods that were employed. So There were some exceptions, one for diplomats. The other one is that if you had enough money, that you could come in and create a business. But there was actually another system that was called the paper son system that was on paper, you actually had children that may or may not exist that they were able to come to the United States. There weren't many of them, but there were some. So the idea of being a paper son, because it was only sons that were allowed, that was one of the systems that Chinese used to circumnavigate that. But there are other things that happened too, which is that Chinese also migrated into many places from Canada to Mexico. And in fact, along the frontier or the frontera in Spanish, there actually are lots and lots of very, very vibrant Chinese Mexican communities, some of which are part of my family, actually. Other questions? You get to ask me questions, Holt. Yes.
Well, this is more to comment. I've worked in this community for 26 years now, and I've gone to an awful lot of wasted in services in my school district. Right. Just Tomo never get back.
I understand. I taught high school, sir.
But this is something every one of my high school students will secure. It's just needs to hear you talk about what makes our community. And our teachers, who are primarily not Asian, unless you're in math and science, right?
No. Didn't know it.
I just think that there are people in this room who should make this happen. So that you are in front of the kids, because the adults in this room have already made their choices. And they have the, as I say, the stripes are colored in on their tigers. But you could influence them in a way that they need to be influenced. They need to know their history.
I appreciate hearing that very much. That's a really, really lovely comment. I think it's actually the job of like, for example, and I'm actually one of the founding faculty of Asian American Studies at Cal State LA. I was also part of the founding of only the second College of Ethnic Studies in the whole United States, actually in Florida, right? So the first was in San Francisco State. I agree. And I believe that knowing more is actually what creates a more just world, right? And knowing more is actually what helps us to understand and love each other. I know that love is kind of like a cheesy thing for an associate professor to say. I know this, and my students say this all the time, like, love again? Dr. J, Dr. Yes. It's me. It's always about love. And knowing history, not just about Chinese American history, but actually Asian American history. Like, it's called just U.S. history. Knowing U.S. history is actually what allows us to be better citizens, in my eyes. But thank you so much, Phil.
One of the quick question. Through your exploration through all of these chapters in American history, what would, if you could share with us, what would be one of the most shocking things that you could share with us that you saw through your exploration?
Good or bad shot.
I mean, I'm a mom, so there's very little that shock. See? I have to like that is true. Uh, Not shocking, but I think one of the most beautiful things that I had found was that even during exclusion, even before the change of our community was in 1965, and when I say our, I just mean America. Because our communities just absolutely changed with the change of immigration policies, and also because that there was finally a realization that all of us participated in things like World War II as parents, that there was participation civically in all manners of American life. But one of the things I found most beautiful in my reading, and in the archives, in the National Archives in DC, when I was doing my research as a PhD student, was, I remember and I recall this. It was this young woman, and actually this was at UCLA. I'm sorry, at UCLA World History Archives. That there was a young woman who talked about her mother, who came here in around the 1870s, and she was quite old when she was giving a school of history. And this woman, her mother, who was illiterate, who was probably around 12 when she came, she actually provided medical services to the women of the community, all the and men that would come to her. And so at a time where that was restricted, at a time where it was not allowed, where you'd actually go to jail if you when looking for reproductive medical services, this illiterate Chinese woman provided that service because she had learned from her husband, who was an herbalist, that herbs that were needed for women to control their own health. And that to me was quite beautiful.
Question. You know, I haven't read. I mean, I haven't looked that much, but I haven't read much about what do the effects of segregation have on Asian Americans.
Like you saw the laws that restricted where Chinese had lived, right? So prior to basically, I would even so let me answer this with a story. So I'm a director of something called the Asian American World History Project, digital project at Cal State LA. And I remember I spoke to one of my elders. His name is Winston Young, and his wife is Joanne Young. They own an engineering company somewhere in San Diego. And he was telling me the story. So he's like a little bit older than Manherix. So I hate to say how old I am because I just turned 47 and I'm 47. So he's so he's close to probably his mid-70s days. And he said that when he first bought his house, and this was back in 1977 or 78, it was in the city of San Diego, which is where I live now. And he said, but a strange thing that happened was that I couldn't see the contract, the real estate contracts. I had, I couldn't see it, and I was like, hey, that's so strange. Why didn't you see this pacha? So I don't know why. Our real estate agent would give it to us until everything was signed, and then they would finally give it to us. I said, okay, that's strange. And he said, you know why? Because on this contract, it said no Negroes, no Orientals, and no Mexicans. And these were the racial covenants that would keep him from buying house. But post 1969 Civil Rights Act, right? So he can have it. But on the covenant of the city, in the contracts, the real estate contracts, that's what happened, right? And so he still has this. He showed it to me, and I was just dumbfounded. Yeah, maybe that's actually the surprise. All right. And I think so. It's not just these racial covenants that kept us apart, but I think it's in all manners of things, right? Not just housing, but in our ability to see the fullness of what America is, right? I mean, who doesn't love being Cherokees, right? Yeah. I mean, that's just weird. Like, who doesn't love asparagus? Who doesn't love like all the things that we consume and love about our community, about U.S. culture and about U.S. history? This is what happens, is that we don't understand the fullness. And that is how it's affected not just trans Americans, but actually all Americans, right?
What about, we hear a lot about African Americans, like in terms of buses, right? Like African Americans had to get off and let white people suffer, or drinking fountains, or school segregations, or restaurants, whatever. And just I never really heard about what happened, because I guess Asians were really in the South, so we there isn't much story to that. But so Asians are mostly in the West. But was there silver?
That's actually not true. So Filipinos were actually here right around the time the Spanish were here, which is way before the establishment in 1776 of the States. So Filipinos have been here as long as the Spanish, the French were here in the South. And in fact, Chinese Americans were in the South in the 1860s, after 1865, after the Civil War, because they were brought in to replace slave labor. So the Chinese were in the South, and they had a different kind of racial categorization that didn't happen in the West because, as we saw with the take bounty, right, of 1898, actually they were able to get desegregation, right, of schools in California. But that only happened state by state until the 1969, but basically until Brown versus the Board of Education, which happens on federal law. So we have like this matrix in the United States. I feel like I'm giving like that 101 on U.S. history, but we have this matrix in the United States where there are state laws, and until it gets moved into the Supreme Court, where federal law is actually determined, like it in the state, it wins at the Supreme Court of California or whatever state by state, then that means it never gets to go vet, right? So in California, we have this strange matrix, and it was only determined to be desegregated for trainees because it isn't until the cases for Mexican Americans with Menendez in Westminster, in Orange Grove, and down in San Diego that it gets desegregated for Mexican American children. And so by the time that Brown versus the Board of Education comes into effect, this is when the wholesale desegregation of education happens. But for Asian Americans, we just have a different history because it's a state by state history of us. Yeah. Does that answer your question? It's very kind of long. I have pus.
Okay, let's take one more question and to member Cho.
Yeah, loved it. So you already gave Honeydew Library a plug earlier for the Chinese Garden. I also want to mention that in the library, they also have a very impressive collection for YC Ball, for two. And, within that library, you also have, works from James Audubon and Euclid's library. So quite impressive it has that there. Can you talk about it? And I don't know how much you know about YC Ball, if you can talk a little bit about him. So next time when we go there, we can kind of maybe better appreciate some of the notes that his family gets donated to Jerome display, which are on the public display at Grand.
I would actually like to hear is from you.
So there's a bunch of collections that I don't know of, but two that I know of. One is YC Hong, who was in Chinatown version 3.0, a very important member, the first Chinese American in Southern California to pass the bar. And so he was a civil rights leader and was involved with a lot of people. He had lots of goers with many other civil rights leaders, not just in the Chinese American community, but all over. We have not only his paper, but his whole office. We have his desk. We have everything. We could reconstruct his office in Chinatown. In San Marino, this lives in San Marino. But also, the first lawyer in Northern California to pass the bar who was Chinese American, Shao and Sing papers. And that collection also came to the Eigenton. So there are many people studying the sort of 1950s, 1960s experience of where the community was breaking out in civil rights using those papers. But when you talk about people coming in and trying to get immigration from China, from the mainland, there are what we call coaching scrolls. And coaching scrolls where you could figure out that you were related to somebody who was already here. And you had to go to these interviews where you had to close your eyes and describe the town you grew up in. And you had to describe every circumstance and situation and which building was here and who these neighbors were. And these are made up. They had to memorize these things. They weren't actually the relatives, but they were working so hard to get here that they would memorize these details to pass those tests. So that's what the Luzos collections that live in San.
Thank you, Randy, and we will be having a meeting on tour at the Hesse War. I think you did, Dr. Five. Ed has something to present to you. Thank you.
On the behalf of City Club, we would like to present this award to Dr. Bob.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Bong. Okay, so in closing up, we have a plug to get involved. Perhaps join the membership committee, help welcome and connect new members, plan membership initiatives, and strengthen our club. Upcoming events we have. Couple weeks, we have our City Talk, which is Zoom, on April 10th at 7 p.m., led by Second VP Ed Awardee. And then next month, we will have the Honorable Judy Chu, which Dr. Phun referred to. And in anticipation of higher than expected attendance and limited seating, refreshments only will be served, desserts, coffee, tea, water. However, in lieu of no dinner next month, we will have the October meeting at the Huntington free to members, which is typically a charge. So we'll make it up in October. Thank you all for your understanding. Announcement will be going out shortly. And then we also have Chris Erskine in May, and then our Fiesta, our Pavilion, National Night Out, Sports Night, October at the Huntington, Trunk or Treat, and in November we'll have the Rose Court, Queen, and Court here. So again, thank you, Dr. Fong, and thank you all for attending. Thank you.